Long before the birth of King Pandukabhaya, the land of Sri Lanka was a place of ancient kingdoms, fierce warriors, and intricate political alliances. It was a time of uncertainty, where royal families often clashed, and power was fought for with blood and strategy. Among these families, the kingdom of Anuradhapura stood at the heart of Sri Lanka's history, its future shaped by the events that unfolded in the tumultuous centuries before its establishment as a great city. In the shadow of the mountains across lush green fields and fertile lands, Anuradhapura was just beginning to emerge as a focal point of power in ancient Sri Lanka. It would later become a bustling city, the capital for more than 1,000 years, but at this moment, it was nothing more than a collection of early settlements overshadowed by larger forces that loomed over the island. However, it was in this environment that the seeds of a future dynasty were sown. At the center of this story is King Pandukabhaya, a ruler whose reign over Anuradhapura would mark the beginning of the Maurya dynasty. Though Pandukabhaya is remembered in Sri Lanka's history as a king who oversaw the growth of the kingdom, his reign would be forever altered by the arrival of his son, Pandukabhaya, whose birth was surrounded by mystery and prophecy. It was said that before Pandukabhaya was born, a prophecy foretold that a child from Pandukabhaya's bloodline would rise to become a king so great that the land would flourish under his rule. This prophecy set the stage for a series of events that would shape the fate of not only the young prince but also the kingdom itself. However, the path to the throne was fraught with danger. The royal family, like many in the ancient world, was not immune to intrigue, betrayal, and ambition. The power struggles between relatives, along with the fear of a rival usurping the throne, led to a growing tension that threatened the very foundation of the Maurya dynasty. King Pandukabhaya, despite his good intentions, would soon find himself at the mercy of those who sought to take control of the kingdom. Yet, within the walls of the royal palace, there was a woman who would become the driving force behind the survival and success of her son, Queen Chevaka. Little was known about her early life before she became the queen, but her strength, intelligence, and determination would soon become pivotal in the life of her son, Pandukabhaya. Queen Chevaka was not just the mother of the future king, she was his protector, his guide, and his unwavering supporter. As the political environment around her grew more volatile, she knew that the survival of her son was crucial, not only to the legacy of their family but to the future of the kingdom itself. With her husband, King Pandukabhaya, under pressure from external threats and internal conspiracies, Chevaka took it upon herself to ensure that Pandukabhaya was groomed for the throne from the very beginning. Her role in the royal palace was complex. She navigated the treacherous world of court politics, where every word and action could have dire consequences. As the mother of the future king, Chevaka understood the importance of securing Pandukabhaya's place in the kingdom's future. Her strategic thinking and understanding of the delicate balance of power within the royal family made her not just a passive figure but a key player in shaping the events that would unfold. The prophecy surrounding Pandukabhaya's birth was not lost on Queen Chevaka. She believed in the importance of this divine message and knew that she must do everything in her power to ensure that her son would survive the treachery of the royal court and claim the throne that was his destiny. Little did she know that her actions would lead to a series of events that would forever change the course of history in Sri Lanka. As we step into the world of ancient Sri Lanka, where kingdoms rose and fell, where prophecies were taken as truths, and where a mother's love and determination shaped the future, the story of Pandukabhaya and Queen Chevaka begins. A story of power, family, and legacy that would endure for centuries. The kingdom of Anuradhapura, with its dense forests and fertile lands, was often a battleground for kings and kingdoms vying for power. Although still in its early stages, the settlement near the riverbanks was rapidly becoming a strategic location due to its abundant resources. The natural beauty of the region concealed the political instability that defined its landscape. King Pandukabhaya, who ruled with a blend of wisdom and peace, was a beloved monarch among his people. Yet, he found himself surrounded by adversaries within his own court, men whose ambitions were as vast as the lands they sought to conquer. While Pandukabhaya tried to keep the kingdom united, his position was far from secure. Many of his family members, including his own brothers, eyed the throne with greed, preparing to challenge his reign at the first sign of weakness. The internal strife within the royal family threatened the future of Anuradhapura itself. It was during this time that Queen Chevaka entered the stage of history. Born into a family of noble lineage, Her beauty was renowned, but it was her intelligence and deep understanding of statecraft that set her apart. She quickly became a trusted advisor to King Pandukabhaya, helping him navigate the delicate political landscapes of the time. Her words were valued not only within the royal court but also among the general populace, who admired her for her foresight and compassion. Yet, despite her influence, Queen Chevaka's true challenge would begin with the birth of her son, Pandukabhaya. As her pregnancy progressed, rumors began to swirl throughout the kingdom. A prophecy had emerged, whispering of a child born under the stars destined to rise to power and usher in an era of prosperity. The prophecy did not go unnoticed. Some believed it to be a divine omen, a blessing from the gods that would forever change the destiny of Anuradhapura. When Pandukabhaya was born, the people hailed his arrival as a sign of greatness to come. However, as the young prince grew, so did the threats to his life. Rival factions within the royal family, fearing the prophecy, began plotting against him. King Pandukabhaya, unable to entirely protect his son from these forces, was forced into difficult decisions to ensure Pandukabhaya's safety. Queen Chevaka's strength became a beacon of hope during these perilous times. She was relentless in her protection of Pandukabhaya, securing his future with every means available. She understood that the royal family's survival depended not only on the king's leadership but also on the life of the young prince. She took it upon herself to ensure that Pandukabhaya remained hidden from those who sought to eliminate him. His childhood was marked by secrecy and quiet movements, shielded from the dangers of the political intrigue that swirled around him. During this time, Chevaka's influence was not just in protecting Pandukabhaya but also in shaping the way he was educated. She entrusted the finest tutors in the land to prepare him for his future role as king. As a young child, Pandukabhaya was trained in the arts of leadership, military strategy, and diplomacy, skills that would later serve him well when he took the throne. Queen Chevaka instilled in him a sense of duty, honor, and responsibility that would remain with him throughout his life. While the young prince was growing in wisdom and strength, his mother, Queen Chevaka, was secretly gathering support from key allies within the kingdom. She knew that the time would come when her son would have to claim his birthright, and when that day arrived, he would need not only the favor of the gods but also the loyalty of the people. Her ability to forge alliances with influential leaders and military figures would later prove to be instrumental in Pandukabhaya's successful rise to power. As Pandukabhaya's adolescence dawned, Queen Chevaka's role became even more crucial. The prophecy foretold that her son would become a king of great might, but the path to the throne was not a smooth one. Rival claimants, many of them distant cousins and members of the royal court, continued to threaten the young prince's life. But Chevaka's resolve was unshaken. She knew that with careful planning and the right allies, her son would not only survive but thrive. Anuradhapura in those early years was on the brink of chaos. The kingdom had no heir apparent after the sudden death of King Pandukabhaya's elder son, leaving Pandukabhaya as the only viable successor. But even as the kingdom teetered on the edge of uncertainty, Queen Chevaka stood firm, steadfast in her determination to secure her son's future. It was during this tumultuous time that the first signs of Pandukabhaya's strength began to emerge. Under the watchful eyes of his mother, he started to take on more responsibilities, showing a natural gift for leadership and strategy. Queen Chevaka made sure he was always surrounded by mentors who would instill in him not only the knowledge of warfare but the wisdom of a ruler who must understand the needs of his people. As Pandukabhaya grew into adolescence, the whispers of the prophecy grew louder, and with it, the urgency to protect him intensified. Queen Chevaka knew that the moment of reckoning was drawing near, the moment when her son would have to step into the role that fate had carved out for him. The fate of Anuradhapura, and the very legacy of their family, depended on this crucial turning point. Little did they know, the forces that sought to destroy Pandukabhaya were closing in. The time for concealment and quiet preparation was coming to an end, and soon, the young prince would have to face the challenges that lay ahead, challenges that only Queen Chevaka's unwavering love and strategic brilliance could help him overcome. As Pandukabhaya grew older, Queen Chevaka's love for her son became more than a maternal bond. It became a strategic force that shaped the course of his destiny. In a time of instability and danger, where power could shift in the blink of an eye, the queen's role as a protector and guide was crucial. She knew that her son's future was uncertain and that to ensure his safety, She had to prepare him for not only the throne but for the harsh realities of the world that awaited him. In the quiet corridors of the royal palace, amidst the whispers of courtly intrigue and looming threats, Chevaka made sure that Pandukabhaya was sheltered from the growing conspiracies that sought to thwart his destiny. The political landscape of Anuradhapura was fraught with dangers, not just from external enemies, but from those within the royal family who saw the young prince as a threat to their own ambitions. The same prophecy that heralded Pandukabhaya as a future king also made him a target for assassination. In the early years of Pandukabhaya's life, Queen Chevaka took it upon herself to keep her son hidden from the prying eyes of rivals. She devised a series of carefully crafted plans to ensure his safety, all while fostering his intellectual and physical growth. She knew that the day would come when her son would need to step into the light and claim his birthright. Until then, she would act as both a mother and a strategist, guiding him through the complexities of royal life. The queen's influence over Pandukabhaya was not just confined to his protection. It extended to his education and development as a ruler. She understood the importance of knowledge, wisdom, and leadership in preparing him for the challenges that lay ahead. The young prince was taught not only the arts of war but also the philosophy of kingship, the responsibility of ruling a kingdom, and the importance of justice, compassion, and diplomacy. Chevaka made sure that Pandukabhaya was instructed in the history of Sri Lanka and the great kings who had come before him, teaching him that leadership was more than just the wielding of power. It was about securing the well-being of the people. As Pandukabhaya matured, Queen Chevaka began to introduce him to the inner workings of the royal court. She would often have private discussions with him, explaining the intricacies of governance, the delicate balance of power, and the challenges of ruling. These conversations were not just about imparting knowledge. They were about shaping Pandukabhaya into the kind of ruler who would command respect, loyalty, and love from his people. Chevaka's words were always thoughtful and measured, guiding her son to understand that being a king was about service to the kingdom, not self-interest. The queen's wisdom extended beyond the walls of the palace. She began to forge alliances with influential families within the kingdom, understanding that Pandukabhaya would need a network of loyal supporters when the time came for him to claim the throne. She met with military leaders, advisors, and nobles, ensuring that they saw her son not as a child but as a future ruler, one whose reign would be marked by strength and justice. But not everyone was convinced. The royal court was still rife with intrigue, and Chevaka faced resistance from those who believed that a young and inexperienced prince could not rule the mighty kingdom of Anuradhapura. Among these were those who were directly opposed to her son's claim to the throne, seeing him as a mere pawn in the larger game of power. These enemies, who were part of the royal family, plotted in the shadows, seeking to eliminate the threat they perceived in the young prince. It was in this environment that Queen Chevaka's true strength as a strategist became evident. While others saw only the royal title as a symbol of power, Chevaka understood that the throne was not just a seat of authority, it was a battlefield. To protect Pandukabhaya, she had to think not just as a mother, but as a ruler herself. Her actions were calculated, every move made with the knowledge that the survival of her son depended on her ability to outwit those who would do him harm. Chevaka's approach was methodical. She kept her son in relative seclusion, ensuring that his identity as the rightful heir remained secret for as long as possible. At the same time, she allowed him to grow and train, preparing him for the day when the shadows would no longer shield him. She also worked to keep the peace in the royal court, carefully navigating the delicate alliances and rivalries that constantly threatened to tear the kingdom apart. It was a dangerous game, but one that Chevaka played with grace and intelligence. As the years passed, Pandukabhaya became a young man, a figure of promise and potential. Under his mother's watchful eye, he excelled in every aspect of his education. He was no longer just a prince in hiding, but a young leader in the making, one who was ready to face the challenges of his birthright. Queen Chevaka continued to guide him, not only in the ways of governance but in the personal qualities that made a great king: courage, humility, and the strength to make difficult decisions. The queen's influence on her son's character was immeasurable. Her unwavering belief in his destiny, her careful nurturing of his talents, and her protection of him in times of danger gave Pandukabhaya the foundation he needed to become the king he was destined to be. But perhaps most importantly, it was Queen Chevaka's love that remained the constant force in his life. Her love for her son was not just that of a mother. It was the love of a woman who saw the future of a kingdom in her child's eyes and would do whatever it took to ensure he fulfilled his destiny. Queen Chevaka's love was a quiet but powerful force, one that shaped not only the life of Pandukabhaya but also the very course of Sri Lanka's history. Through her guidance, her son would rise from the shadows and claim the throne of Anuradhapura, and it would be her wisdom, strength, and love that would ensure his reign would be one of prosperity and greatness. The time was coming, soon, when Pandukabhaya would have to leave the safety of his mother's protection and step into the light of history. But before that moment arrived, Queen Chevaka had one final task to complete to make sure that when her son finally ascended to the throne, he would do so as a king not only worthy of the crown but one who could lead his people with the same love, wisdom, and courage that had defined his mother's life. As Queen Chevaka continued to nurture her son, she knew that time was running out. The royal court had grown more dangerous as rivals sensed that the young prince was no longer just a child, he was now a threat to those who sought power for themselves. The shadows that had once protected Pandukabhaya now seemed to grow longer, filled with whispers of treachery, intrigue, and ambition. Despite the dangers lurking around every corner, Queen Chevaka remained steadfast. The knowledge that her son was not just any prince but one chosen by destiny kept her focused. As she continued to guide him, she noticed the first signs of greatness in Pandukabhaya's character. The boy, now entering his teenage years, had grown into a young man of remarkable intelligence and wisdom. He was sharp, quick to learn, and driven by an inherent sense of justice. It was clear to Queen Chevaka that the qualities that would define his rule were already taking shape. But in this world of constant power struggles, these qualities alone would not be enough. Pandukabhaya's survival depended on far more than wisdom and compassion. He needed the ability to see beyond the present, to understand the intricate web of political alliances, and to anticipate the moves of his enemies. Queen Chevaka knew that her son needed to be prepared for a future where the line between friend and foe was often blurred. With this in mind, she began to introduce Pandukabhaya to the complex world of royal diplomacy. She arranged private meetings with trusted advisors and military leaders, slowly expanding the circle of influence that would later become critical in his ascension to the throne. These meetings were often intense, filled with discussions on the shifting allegiances within the kingdom and the potential threats from rival factions. Through these experiences, Pandukabhaya was taught not only the art of ruling but also the delicate art of negotiation, how to build alliances, navigate treachery, and maintain a position of power when everything seemed uncertain. Pandukabhaya's education extended beyond the walls of the palace. Queen Chevaka arranged for him to meet with the greatest minds of the kingdom, the priests, philosophers, and scholars who had spent their lives studying the ancient texts and the histories of great rulers. Through these discussions, Pandukabhaya gained a deeper understanding of the responsibilities that came with kingship and how power, when wielded unjustly, could corrupt even the noblest of hearts. He learned that leadership was not just about strength, it was about balance, fairness, and the ability to see the greater good even when it meant making difficult decisions. The queen's influence on her son was evident in the way Pandukabhaya carried himself. Though he was still young, his demeanor had begun to reflect the calm assurance of a ruler. His voice, once uncertain, now rang with conviction. His eyes, once full of innocence, now carried the weight of the future. Chevaka knew that her time with her son was limited. The day would soon come when she would have to let go and trust that he was ready to take the mantle of leadership. That day, however, would not come without one final trial. While Queen Chevaka worked tirelessly to prepare her son for the throne, the political landscape continued to shift. Her enemies in the royal court grew bolder in their efforts to undermine the future king. There were whispers that Pandukabhaya was still too young, too inexperienced to lead. They spoke of other potential heirs, cousins, and distant relatives who they believed were more suited for the throne. The queen knew that if Pandukabhaya was to claim his birthright, he would have to do so sooner than expected before his enemies could rally behind their own candidate. It was during this period that Queen Chevaka made a critical decision. She called Pandukabhaya into her private chambers one evening, a rare occurrence, as she rarely revealed her true thoughts in public. She sat him down, her gaze unwavering, and for the first time, spoke plainly about the challenges ahead. "My son," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "the time has come for you to take your place. The world will not wait for you to grow older, and neither can we. You must be ready not just in body, but in spirit. The throne is not given, it must be seized. You must be prepared to face the trials that will come, not with fear, but with courage. And you must remember that it is not power you seek, it is justice for the people, for the kingdom. Pandukabhaya, who had always trusted his mother's wisdom, listened intently. He had spent his youth in the safety of their secluded palace, hidden from the dangers that loomed outside. Now, the reality of the situation was becoming clearer. The time of preparation was over. His enemies would soon come for him, and he would have no choice but to rise to meet them. Queen Chevaka's words were a turning point for Pandukabhaya. It was in this moment that he understood fully the weight of the crown that he was destined to wear. It was not a symbol of personal glory but a responsibility that he must bear with honor. He could no longer be a child under his mother's protection, he had to become the ruler he was destined to be. But he would not do it alone. The lessons she had imparted to him would guide him through the most difficult moments of his life. The queen's heart was heavy as she prepared to send her son into the world. She knew that the days of quiet safety were over, and that soon Pandukabhaya would be forced to face the very forces that had once conspired to kill him. She also knew that her time as his protector was coming to an end. But as she looked into her son's eyes, she saw not just the child she had raised, but the future king who would shape the fate of Anuradhapura. One final act of love and wisdom remained for Queen Chevaka. Before Pandukabhaya left her side, she gave him a small token, a symbol of his royal bloodline, a family heirloom that had been passed down through generations of kings. She placed it in his hand and whispered, "This is your legacy. It is not just a symbol of your birthright, but a reminder of the responsibility you bear. You are not just the son of a king. You are the future of Anuradhapura." With those words, Queen Chevaka let go of the last of her fears. She had done everything in her power to prepare her son. Now it was his turn to walk the path of kingship, and she would always be there in his heart, guiding him with the love and wisdom that only a mother could give. The calm that had enveloped the royal palace in Anuradhapura for so many years was now a thing of the past. The time had come for Pandukabhaya to emerge from the shadows, to take his rightful place as the future king of Sri Lanka. But as the young prince began to prepare for his destiny, the treacherous undercurrents of palace intrigue threatened to undo all that his mother had worked so tirelessly to protect. Within the royal family, there was a growing power struggle, one that threatened not only the future of Pandukabhaya but the very stability of Anuradhapura itself. King Pandukabhaya, though loved by the people, was growing older, and his health was failing. He had no male heirs to succeed him, and the throne was in danger of falling into the hands of those who sought power for their own gain. It was not just the external enemies of the kingdom that posed a threat, but the very people closest to the king, the men and women of his own bloodline. The rivalry between the royal factions had been simmering for years, but with Pandukabhaya reaching the age where he could claim his birthright, the stakes were higher than ever. In the royal court, whispers of rebellion and treason filled the air. Those who saw the young prince as a threat to their own ambitions were preparing to act. Some were distant relatives who believed that their bloodline gave them a better claim to the throne. Others were power-hungry courtiers who had been quietly maneuvering behind the scenes for years. Queen Chevaka, ever vigilant, had foreseen the dangers of such a power struggle. She knew that, in the delicate world of royal politics, a single misstep could cost them everything. The queen's wisdom and foresight had guided her through many challenges in the past. But this was a battle unlike any other. A battle for the very soul of the kingdom. The first signs of conflict came from the king's own brothers, who had long held aspirations of ruling the kingdom themselves. They had watched as King Pandukabhaya grew weaker, and their ambitions began to cloud their judgment. They saw the young Pandukabhaya as an obstacle to their plans, a boy who could easily be manipulated or eliminated altogether. The first challenge came from the elder brother of King Pandukabhaya, who had always resented the young king's ascension to the throne. He believed that the throne should have been his, and that Pandukabhaya's rise would be the final blow to his own claim to power. With whispers of discontent spreading among the royal court, this uncle began to rally supporters to his cause, convincing key military commanders and advisors that the kingdom needed a stronger, more experienced ruler. But it was not just the king's brothers who were plotting against Pandukabhaya. There were also ambitious cousins, nobles, and military leaders who had long believed that the young prince's time had not yet come. They argued that the throne should be occupied by someone with more experience, someone who had proven their worth on the battlefield or in matters of statecraft. They saw Pandukabhaya's youth as a liability, a weakness that could be exploited to further their own agendas. As tensions rose, Queen Chevaka became increasingly concerned. She had always known that the path to the throne would be fraught with obstacles, but the venomous rivalry within the royal family was more dangerous than she had anticipated. There were factions within the court that were actively working against her son, and even those who appeared loyal could be swayed with promises of power. At this critical moment, Queen Chevaka knew that it was time for action. She could no longer afford to rely solely on her influence behind the scenes. She had to act decisively to ensure Pandukabhaya's safety and secure his place on the throne. She gathered a small group of trusted allies, those who had proven their loyalty over the years, and began to form her own counter-alliance. These men and women were not only loyal to the queen but also recognized the value of keeping Pandukabhaya in power. Many of them were military leaders who had served in the king's campaigns and had witnessed the strength and wisdom of the young prince firsthand. Queen Chevaka's strategy was twofold. First, she knew that she had to neutralize the growing threat within the royal family, particularly the king's brothers and cousins who had been so vocal in their opposition to Pandukabhaya's claim. She worked tirelessly behind closed doors to weaken their alliances, turning key courtiers and military commanders to her side. She used her knowledge of the inner workings of the royal court to expose their secret meetings and covert dealings, slowly eroding their support. Second, the queen began to prepare Pandukabhaya for the inevitable confrontation. She had always been his teacher, but now she had to prepare him for the political battlefield he would soon face. In their private conversations, Queen Chevaka began to impart more practical lessons on how to navigate the complexities of power. She taught him how to read people, how to detect lies, and how to use diplomacy to turn enemies into allies. Pandukabhaya's education, which had once focused solely on governance and military strategy, now included lessons in the art of survival. He had to learn not only how to lead his kingdom but how to protect it from those who would seek to tear it apart. The young prince, though inexperienced in the ways of court politics, quickly grasped the weight of the situation. He knew that this was no longer just a battle for the throne, it was a battle for the very survival of the kingdom. The power struggle within the royal family had the potential to tear Anuradhapura apart, and if he did not act quickly, he would lose everything. But Queen Chevaka's wisdom and careful planning soon began to bear fruit. As tensions within the royal court reached a boiling point, Pandukabhaya made his move. He publicly declared his intention to claim the throne, not as a mere boy but as the rightful heir. With the support of Queen Chevaka's allies, he took the first step toward asserting his power. The royal family, once united under King Pandukabhaya, was now divided. The future of Anuradhapura hung in the balance. The struggle within the royal court was far from over. But Pandukabhaya had taken the first steps toward securing his place as king. He had proven that with the right guidance and determination, a young prince could rise above the treachery and deceit that often consumed the halls of power. And though the battles ahead would be long and hard, Pandukabhaya knew that with Queen Chevaka by his side, he could face whatever challenges came his way. As the day of reckoning approached, Queen Chevaka stood firm, her resolve unshaken. She knew that this power struggle was only the beginning. The throne of Anuradhapura would not be easily claimed, and many would seek to see her son fall. But she also knew that her son had inherited not just her wisdom, but the strength to lead his kingdom into a new era. And it was this knowledge that gave her the courage to face the challenges ahead, knowing that, together, mother and son would overcome the darkness of political turmoil and set the kingdom of Anuradhapura on a path to greatness. The royal court had become a powder keg, the simmering tensions now threatening to explode into open conflict. As the factions within the palace continued to rally for or against Pandukabhaya's claim to the throne, Queen Chevaka saw the danger more clearly than ever before. The scheming of the king's brothers, cousins, and ambitious courtiers had escalated to a point where the very survival of her son was at risk. The young prince, still a boy in many ways despite his education and training, had become the focal point of a brewing storm. While he was more than ready to take on the responsibilities of kingship, his enemies saw him as a mere pawn to be eliminated. The conspirators, once hidden in the shadows, now moved with reckless abandon, pushing closer to the moment when they would strike. Queen Chevaka, who had always been one step ahead, realized that the only way to ensure her son's safety and the future of Anuradhapura was to take a drastic and painful step. It was with a heavy heart that she made the decision to send Pandukabhaya into exile. She could no longer shield him from the dangers of the royal court, and she knew that as long as he remained in Anuradhapura, the risk of assassination was too great. The throne would have to wait for him. The most important thing now was his survival. The queen's decision weighed heavily on her. She had raised Pandukabhaya with the expectation that he would one day rule, that he would carry on the legacy of the Maurya dynasty and bring prosperity to the kingdom. But she also understood that his safety was paramount. She had never been one to act out of fear. Her decisions were always driven by wisdom and foresight. But this was a sacrifice, one that no mother should have to make. In the dead of night, Queen Chevaka arranged for Pandukabhaya to be secretly sent away from the palace under the protection of a few trusted soldiers and advisors. The plan was simple. Pandukabhaya would disappear into the wilderness where he would remain hidden until the time was right for him to return. It was a risky move, but one that Chevaka believed was necessary. She could not afford to let her son fall into the hands of those who sought to destroy him. Before he left, the queen called Pandukabhaya to her chambers. It was a moment neither of them would ever forget. Her eyes, usually filled with calm wisdom, now shone with tears that she would not let fall. She had always been strong for him, but now, in this moment of separation, the weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders. Pandukabhaya, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion that swelled within her. I have prepared you for this moment, and though I would give anything to keep you here, I know that this is the only way. You must survive. You must wait until the time is right, and then you will return to claim your destiny. Pandukabhaya, though young, understood the gravity of the situation. He had been raised to believe in the prophecy, to understand the importance of his role as the future ruler of Anuradhapura. But he also understood the peril his mother had placed him in by sending him away. The kingdom, his birthright, and the people he would one day rule were all at risk, and now he was leaving it behind. He looked into his mother's eyes and nodded, a silent promise passing between them. I will return, mother. I swear it. Chevaka placed her hands on her son's shoulders, her touch both tender and firm. You will return, my son. But until then, you must be strong. Remember everything I have taught you. Remember that the kingdom is not just about power, it is about the people. They will need you, and when you return, you will be ready. With one final embrace, Pandukabhaya left the palace under the cover of darkness. Queen Chevaka watched him go, her heart breaking with every step he took away from her. But she knew that it was necessary. The survival of the kingdom and of her son depended on this decision. As Pandukabhaya disappeared into the night, Chevaka turned back to the royal court. The danger was far from over. She could not afford to let her enemies know of the prince's exile, nor could she reveal the full extent of her plans. For the time being, she would remain in the shadows, manipulating the political currents within the palace, all while keeping the secret of Pandukabhaya's whereabouts. The months that followed were filled with quiet dread. Queen Chevaka continued to rule behind the scenes, maintaining a fragile peace in the court while keeping her son's exile a closely guarded secret. She sent trusted messengers to check on Pandukabhaya, ensuring that he was safe and well hidden. The young prince, though far from home, remained steadfast in his training. His exile was not a time of idleness. Rather, it was a time for him to grow stronger, to hone his skills, and to prepare for the day when he would return to reclaim the throne. But the queen's heart, though strong, was constantly heavy with worry. Every day that passed without word from her son felt like a lifetime. She trusted in the plan, but a mother's love is never so easily swayed by logic. She missed him terribly, and though she remained composed on the outside, her thoughts were consumed by the hope that one day Pandukabhaya would return to her and to the kingdom stronger and wiser than ever before. Meanwhile, in his exile, Pandukabhaya's thoughts were filled with both longing and determination. He knew that his mother's sacrifice was not just for his safety, it was a test, a trial that would shape him into the ruler he was destined to become. The prince spent his days in the wilderness, learning from those who had once been loyal to his family. He trained in the art of war, studied the ways of diplomacy, and began to understand the delicate balance of power that would one day be his to command. But more than anything, he learned the value of patience. The time for action would come, but it would be a time of his choosing. As the seasons changed and as Chevaka continued to weave her web of political intrigue in the court, both mother and son knew that their paths would soon converge again. The power struggle within the royal family had not abated, and the throne was still at stake. But when the time was right, Pandukabhaya would return, not as the boy who had once hidden in the shadows, but as the man who would claim his birthright and fulfill the prophecy that had been whispered at his birth. Until then, Queen Chevaka would continue to play her part, her heart torn between the love for her son and the duty she had to the kingdom. The journey ahead would be long and the trials would be many. But with Pandukabhaya's exile came the hope that the future would soon be in his hands, and with it, the destiny of Anuradhapura. The years passed in the shadows, with Pandukabhaya's exile becoming a memory, both painful and distant. Though separated from his birthright, the prince had never forgotten the purpose that burned within him. Each day spent away from Anuradhapura was another day of growth, of becoming the man who would one day return to his people and claim the throne that was rightfully his. In the wilderness, Pandukabhaya had trained relentlessly. The teachings his mother had imparted to him, the philosophy of kingship, the duty to the people, the strength required for leadership, became the foundation upon which he built his future. The months turned into years, and the boy who had once been hidden away in secrecy became a warrior in his own right, skilled in both strategy and combat. He had learned not only the art of battle but the art of patience. He knew that the day of his return would come, and when it did, he would be ready, despite the pain of separation. There were times when Pandukabhaya could feel the presence of his mother's love and guidance. Though they were far apart, Queen Chevaka's teachings remained etched in his heart, guiding his every decision. He understood that his exile had been both a sacrifice and a test, one that would prepare him for the challenges of ruling Anuradhapura. But the time had come for that test to end. The kingdom of Anuradhapura was still embroiled in the turmoil that had forced Pandukabhaya into exile. The power struggles within the royal family had not abated, and with each passing day, the throne remained a contested prize. The time had come for the young prince to return, not as a boy, but as a man ready to claim his birthright. Queen Chevaka, who had remained vigilant during the years of her son's absence, had been preparing for this moment. Her secret network of allies within the royal court had been working quietly to ensure that the time was right for Pandukabhaya's return. The political landscape was still fraught with danger, but there was a growing sense of instability within the kingdom. The king's brothers and cousins, who had once believed themselves secure in their positions, were now divided. The people of Anuradhapura, who had long awaited the return of their rightful heir, were beginning to stir. It was a time of uncertainty, and it was into this uncertainty that Pandukabhaya would step. The day of his return was marked by an unspoken tension in the air. Pandukabhaya, with his loyal followers at his side, crossed the borders into Anuradhapura in the dead of night. The kingdom he had once known, his birthright, was within his grasp, but he knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The enemies who had plotted against him were still waiting, their eyes watching every move. His every step, every decision, would determine not only his future but the fate of Anuradhapura itself. His first move was a bold one. He sent word to the royal court, announcing his return and declaring his intention to claim the throne. There was no longer any room for doubt. Pandukabhaya was no longer the young prince in hiding. He was a man who had been forged in the fire of exile, and he was prepared to fight for what was rightfully his. The response from the royal court was swift. The news of Pandukabhaya's return spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of reaction from the various factions within the kingdom. Some, loyal to the rightful heir, rallied to his side, ready to support him in his bid for the throne. Others, still loyal to the king's brothers and cousins, saw his return as a threat to their power and began to mobilize against him. Queen Chevaka, now back at the heart of the royal court, played a critical role in guiding her son's strategy. Her keen political mind, honed over years of maneuvering in the shadows, was instrumental in securing the loyalty of key figures within the kingdom. Through her connections, She brokered alliances with influential military leaders and political figures who were dissatisfied with the current state of affairs. With each passing day, Pandukabhaya's support grew, as did his resolve to reclaim what was his by birthright. The first confrontation came quickly. Armed with the loyalty of his supporters and the knowledge of his mother's careful plans, Pandukabhaya led a small but formidable force to the gates of Anuradhapura. There, he faced off against the forces of those who sought to block his claim to the throne. It was a battle of wills as much as it was a battle of strength. Pandukabhaya, though young, had proven himself a capable leader and a fierce warrior during his exile. His army was composed not only of experienced soldiers but also of men who believed in his cause, men who had long awaited his return. The clash at the gates of Anuradhapura was swift and decisive. Pandukabhaya's forces, led by the prince himself, overwhelmed the defenders, forcing them to retreat. But this victory was not just about military might, it was a statement. Pandukabhaya had returned not as a claimant, but as the rightful ruler. He had come to take his place on the throne, and he would not be deterred. Within the walls of the palace, the political battle raged. The remaining factions of the royal family, those who had once sought to thwart Pandukabhaya's rise, now found themselves divided. The king's brothers, once united in their opposition, now found themselves at odds. Some saw the prince's victory as inevitable and began to shift their loyalties, while others remained steadfast in their belief that the throne should belong to someone with more experience. But the tide had turned, and the people of Anuradhapura began to rally behind Pandukabhaya, recognizing in him the strength and leadership they had long awaited. Queen Chevaka, ever the strategist, continued to guide her son's every move. She knew that victory was not just about defeating enemies on the battlefield, it was about securing the hearts and minds of the people. As Pandukabhaya's forces marched through the streets of Anuradhapura, the city's citizens came out to witness the return of their rightful heir. They cheered, their voices rising in unison, as they saw in him the future they had been promised, the return of the true king. It was on the day that Pandukabhaya entered the palace gates, victorious and resolute, that the people of Anuradhapura knew their kingdom was about to change forever. The young prince, now a man of strength and purpose, had returned not only to claim the throne but to lead the kingdom into a new era. As Pandukabhaya ascended to the throne of Anuradhapura with his mother's proud gaze upon him, he knew that the journey was far from over. The challenges of kingship lay ahead, and he would face them with the wisdom and strength that Queen Chevaka had instilled in him. But for now, he had reclaimed what was his by birthright, and the kingdom of Anuradhapura stood on the brink of a new chapter, one that would be written by the hands of a king, guided by the love of a mother, and shaped by the sacrifices that had led him to this moment. The gates of Anuradhapura had swung open, but the battle for the throne was far from over. Though Pandukabhaya had successfully re-entered the city, the political and military conflicts that had been simmering for years had now reached a boiling point. The initial victory was a crucial step, but it was only the beginning of a much larger struggle, a fight not only for the throne but for the very soul of Anuradhapura. Queen Chevaka, ever the strategist, knew that the true test had arrived. The royal court, once unified under King Pandukabhaya, was now a fractured, contentious space with factions loyal to different branches of the royal family. While Pandukabhaya's forces had taken control of the gates and overthrown some of the defenders, there were still key players in the court, powerful military leaders, influential nobles, and ambitious members of the royal family who would not simply surrender their claims to power. In the wake of Pandukabhaya's return, the remaining royal factions regrouped, rallying to the banner of those who had once been rivals. The royal family's internal strife had become a battleground in itself. And even though the king's brothers and cousins had been divided by internal disputes, there were still those who believed they had a rightful claim to the throne. Some were willing to fight to the death for their position, while others, less certain of their power, sought to strike alliances with whichever side seemed to have the upper hand. Queen Chevaka's role as a mediator, a tactician, and a leader became more critical than ever. She knew that the fate of the kingdom depended not just on her son's military successes but on his ability to unite the divided factions of the royal family and the court. Pandukabhaya, now a king in name but not in full control, needed the full support of the people and the key military figures to solidify his rule. But these would not come easily. Loyalty was hard-earned, and in this volatile climate no allegiance was guaranteed. Pandukabhaya's first challenge was a battle to gain the loyalty of Anuradhapura's military commanders. The kingdom's greatest strength lay in its army, and it was the loyalty of these men that would determine the future of his reign. He sent emissaries to those generals and commanders who had not yet pledged their support, offering promises of land, influence, and security in exchange for their loyalty. But many were hesitant, unsure whether aligning with Pandukabhaya would lead to lasting power or open them up to further conflict with the royal factions opposing him. As tensions grew, the remnants of the opposition began to gather forces. The power struggle between Pandukabhaya and his rivals intensified as both sides prepared for the inevitable clash. The royal city of Anuradhapura, once a symbol of stability, now became a battlefield. The city's gates, which had opened to celebrate the return of the rightful heir, now stood as a gateway to war. The armies of Pandukabhaya, bolstered by the loyalty of key commanders and the support of the common people, met the opposition in the fields just outside the city. What followed was a battle that would echo throughout history, a battle not only for control of the kingdom but for the future of Sri Lanka itself. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the battlefield as the two sides prepared to clash. Pandukabhaya, riding at the front of his army, was no longer the young prince who had once fled for his life. He had become a king in his own right, his resolve hardened by years of exile and preparation. He had learned the arts of war and diplomacy, and now he would prove that he was ready to rule. Queen Chevaka, from her position in the royal palace, watched the battle unfold. Though she had been unable to fight beside her son on the front lines, her influence was felt throughout the war effort. Her careful diplomacy had garnered the support of influential nobles and military commanders, and it was this support that would ensure the victory of her son. She had also placed trusted allies in key positions within the court, ensuring that any attempt to undermine Pandukabhaya's reign would be swiftly thwarted. As the armies collided, the battle raged on with fierce intensity. The cries of warriors filled the air as swords clashed and shields splintered. Pandukabhaya's army fought with a strength born of determination and necessity. This was not just a battle for the throne. It was a battle to restore the legitimacy of the Maurya dynasty, to reclaim the heritage that had been stolen from them. The tide of the battle seemed to shift with every passing hour. For a time, it appeared that the opposition had the upper hand, pushing Pandukabhaya's forces back. But the young king, drawing upon the lessons of strategy and leadership taught to him by Queen Chevaka, remained calm under pressure. He knew that in war, as in life, moments of despair often precede moments of victory. With a rallying cry, he turned the tide of the battle, leading his forces in a final push toward the heart of the opposition. As the battle neared its climax, the enemy's forces began to falter. The morale of the opposition wavered as the realization dawned that Pandukabhaya's reign was inevitable. The strength of his leadership, bolstered by the wisdom and support of his mother, had carried the day. The last of the royal faction's armies, broken and defeated, began to retreat, their hopes of taking the throne fading away. Victory was at hand. As the sun set over the battlefield, casting a golden hue over the fields of war, Pandukabhaya stood victorious. The kingdom of Anuradhapura, battered but not broken, had emerged from the chaos of civil war into a new era. The battle for the throne was over, but the battle for the hearts and minds of the people would continue. Pandukabhaya's first act as king was not one of vengeance but of healing. He knew that to rule with strength, he must first restore unity to the kingdom. With the support of his mother, Queen Chevaka, he began the difficult process of reconciling with those who had opposed him. Some were punished, but many were offered the opportunity to return to the fold, with promises of security and a new role in the kingdom's rebuilding. Queen Chevaka, ever the wise advisor, stood by her son's side, guiding him through the delicate process of consolidating his rule. She knew that the battle for the throne was only the beginning. The true challenge would be in ensuring the prosperity and stability of Anuradhapura in the years to come. But with Pandukabhaya now firmly on the throne, and with her guidance, she had no doubt that the kingdom would thrive. As the city of Anuradhapura began to heal, the people celebrated the return of their rightful king. The prophecy that had foretold Pandukabhaya's rise had come true, and the kingdom looked to the future with hope, ready to embrace the prosperity and peace that would come under his rule. But even as they celebrated, Queen Chevaka and Pandukabhaya knew that there would always be challenges ahead. The throne was now his, but the work of ruling had only just begun. Together, they would face whatever trials the future held, united in their love for each other and their shared vision for the kingdom they had fought so hard to protect. The battlefield was silent, the echoes of clashing swords and battle cries replaced by a quiet stillness as Anuradhapura began to rebuild itself from the ravages of war. Pandukabhaya, now firmly established as the king, stood on the precipice of a new era. His victory was hard-won, but it had secured his place on the throne. The time had come for him to claim his birthright in the most formal of ways, a coronation that would not only solidify his rule but also mark the beginning of a new chapter for the kingdom. Queen Chevaka, ever the pillar of wisdom and support, stood by her son's side throughout the preparation for the coronation. It was a moment she had dreamed of for years, ever since she had received the prophecy that her son would one day rule. The long, arduous journey from the moment of his birth, through the exile, the political turmoil, and the war, had all led to this point. Now her son would step into the role he was always destined for, not as a boy hidden in the shadows, but as the true ruler of Anuradhapura. The coronation ceremony itself was an event unlike any other. The people of Anuradhapura, who had long awaited the return of their king, gathered in the grand courtyard of the royal palace. The city, which had once been the heart of a fractured kingdom, now seemed to pulse with the energy of a united people, eager to witness the moment when their future would be secured. As the ceremony unfolded, Pandukabhaya stood before the high priests and advisors, his heart filled with a sense of both pride and responsibility. The sacred rituals were performed, the chants of the priests filling the air as they invoked the blessings of the gods. The crown, an ancient symbol of royal authority passed down through generations, was placed upon his head. With this act, Pandukabhaya was no longer just a prince, he was the undisputed king of Anuradhapura. Queen Chevaka watched the coronation unfold with a deep sense of pride. The boy she had protected, taught, and guided was now a king, and the weight of that responsibility was evident in his posture, though there were no outward signs of fear or uncertainty. She knew that the challenges of leadership were just beginning. It was not enough to simply rule. Pandukabhaya had to lead with wisdom, justice, and foresight. The kingdom, though victorious, was still scarred from years of conflict. The true test of a king came not in the moments of triumph but in the quiet years of rebuilding that followed. As the coronation came to a close, the royal court erupted in applause, and the people of Anuradhapura cheered. The long-awaited day had arrived, and their rightful king had taken the throne. But for Pandukabhaya and Queen Chevaka, the work was only beginning. The real test would be in the days, months, and years to come as the kingdom faced the task of rebuilding and securing its future. In the days following the coronation, Pandukabhaya wasted no time in setting his vision for the kingdom in motion. His first order of business was to ensure that the political unity forged through the battle for the throne was maintained. He called upon the nobles, military leaders, and key officials to pledge their loyalty to the crown. Those who had been opponents during the power struggle were offered the chance to reintegrate into the kingdom's governance, though with carefully measured oversight. Pandukabhaya was determined to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. He knew that the power struggles that had once torn the royal family apart could easily resurface if not addressed properly. He worked closely with Queen Chevaka to form a new council, one that would include not only his loyal supporters but also those who had once opposed him. It was a bold move, but one that was necessary for the long-term stability of the kingdom. The queen, with her unparalleled understanding of both diplomacy and the human heart, was instrumental in guiding her son through the process. She advised him on how to balance power with mercy, how to ensure that those who had fought against him would feel included in the new order. Pandukabhaya listened to his mother's counsel, understanding that the true strength of a king lay not in his ability to crush his enemies, but in his capacity to unify his people, regardless of their past allegiances. Meanwhile, Pandukabhaya turned his attention to the physical rebuilding of Anuradhapura. The kingdom had been scarred by years of internal conflict, and the people needed to see tangible proof that their king was committed to restoring their way of life. The city's infrastructure, its roads, its markets, its temples, had been neglected during the years of strife. Pandukabhaya ordered the construction of new public works, including the restoration of the great temples and shrines that had long been symbols of Anuradhapura's spiritual heart. Queen Chevaka, who had always understood the importance of culture and religion in maintaining the unity of the people, encouraged her son to invest in the kingdom's spiritual life as well. The restoration of the temples would not only serve as a physical act of rebuilding but as a symbolic gesture of the kingdom's renewed commitment to the gods. Anuradhapura had always been a center of religious and cultural learning, and Pandukabhaya's investment in these institutions would show the people that their king valued the traditions that had sustained the kingdom for centuries. The kingdom also needed to heal from the divisions of war. Pandukabhaya, with his mother's guidance, embarked on a series of reforms aimed at restoring justice and fairness throughout the land. He established new laws that protected the rights of the people and ensured that the burdens of the past, taxation, land disputes, and corruption would no longer plague the kingdom. Queen Chevaka played a key role in ensuring that these reforms were fair and just, advising her son to remain true to his vision of a kingdom that would serve the people, rather than one that would exploit them. As the months passed, Anuradhapura began to recover. The markets buzzed with activity, the temples filled with worshippers, and the people once again began to believe in the promise of a brighter future. Though there were still those who resisted the new order, they were few in number, and their opposition was quickly quelled through diplomacy and, when necessary, force. The bond between Pandukabhaya and Queen Chevaka remained as strong as ever. The queen, who had sacrificed so much for her son's success, found a sense of fulfillment in knowing that he was now on the path to becoming the ruler she had always known he could be. Though the challenges were far from over, she knew that together, they could overcome whatever obstacles the future might hold. As the sun set on the day of the coronation, casting a warm glow over the kingdom, Queen Chevaka looked to her son with pride. The prophecy that had foretold his rise had come true. The kingdom of Anuradhapura was in his hands, and with the guidance of the queen it would flourish. The future of the kingdom, once uncertain, was now secure, and with Pandukabhaya as its king, Anuradhapura would know peace, prosperity, and justice for generations to come. With the kingdom of Anuradhapura restored and the power struggles behind them, Pandukabhaya stood at the helm of a prosperous but fragile reign. The early days of his rule, marked by the consolidation of power and the physical rebuilding of the kingdom, were just the beginning. For Pandukabhaya, the real challenge lay ahead, ensuring the long-term stability of the kingdom, keeping the political factions in check, and building alliances that would solidify his reign for generations. And for that he relied heavily on his mother, Queen Chevaka, whose political acumen and diplomatic skills were unparalleled. Though the war for the throne was over, the battle for influence in the royal court was far from won. Pandukabhaya knew that as long as there were rivals, both within and outside the royal family, the kingdom's unity would always be in jeopardy. The political landscape of Sri Lanka had always been unstable, and it was Chevaka's foresight and wisdom that had guided them thus far. Now, it was time for her to step into an even more pivotal role. Queen Chevaka had never been content with merely being a passive figure in the background. From the very beginning of Pandukabhaya's journey, she had always been a political strategist, a counselor, and an active participant in the kingdom's governance. But now, with her son firmly on the throne, her role was about to take on new significance. Her advice was sought not only by Pandukabhaya but also by foreign diplomats, military commanders, and nobles. Her influence stretched beyond the walls of the palace and into the farthest reaches of the kingdom. Pandukabhaya, although a capable ruler, was wise enough to recognize that his mother's experience and understanding of the intricate web of politics were invaluable. He trusted her judgment implicitly, knowing that her advice had always been rooted in the long-term health of the kingdom. As the king began to focus on the military and economic expansion of Anuradhapura, it was Chevaka who handled the delicate matters of diplomacy, courtly alliances, and internal politics. She was the bridge between the throne and the people, ensuring that the royal family remained not only in power but in good standing with the various factions of society. One of Queen Chevaka's first major acts in this new role was to solidify relationships with neighboring kingdoms. The surrounding lands, many of which had once been rivals to Anuradhapura, were now looking at the newly crowned king with both respect and suspicion. Pandukabhaya's rise had been marked by military might, but Chevaka understood that peace could not be secured through force alone. She knew that Anuradhapura's future depended on forging strong diplomatic ties, ones built on mutual trust and respect. Chevaka began by reaching out to the most powerful neighboring kingdom, the kingdom of Rahuna to the south. The kingdom had long been a potential threat to Anuradhapura's sovereignty, but it also offered rich agricultural lands and valuable resources that could benefit both kingdoms. Her diplomatic mission was carefully orchestrated. She sent emissaries to Rahuna, offering marriage alliances and trade agreements that would benefit both realms. She knew that the key to lasting peace with Rahuna was not through subjugation but through mutual cooperation. Her ability to negotiate with the king of Rahuna was a testament to her diplomatic finesse. She was able to turn a potential enemy into a key ally. But Queen Chevaka's diplomacy was not limited to foreign realms. She also turned her attention inward to the nobility and military leaders who remained loyal to the old regime. Though Pandukabhaya had solidified his rule through military victories, the old guard of aristocrats still held significant sway in the royal court. Many of these nobles, though they had grudgingly accepted Pandukabhaya as their king, still harbored doubts about his ability to rule for the long term. Some sought to undermine his authority through subtle means, hoping to return the throne to their own families. Chevaka, with her deep understanding of human nature, knew how to approach these delicate matters. Rather than seeking to crush the old guard, she engaged with them diplomatically, appealing to their sense of pride and tradition. She negotiated with the high-ranking military officers, offering them positions of power and influence within the new administration. In exchange, she sought their loyalty to her son's rule, ensuring that they would remain steadfast in their support of the crown. Her diplomatic efforts extended beyond the kingdom's borders. She maintained contact with other kingdoms in the region, from the kingdoms in the north to the coastal territories in the east. Through her network of emissaries and envoys, she worked tirelessly to ensure that Anuradhapura was not isolated but was seen as a stabilizing force in the region. She also initiated trade agreements with merchants from distant lands, increasing the flow of wealth into the kingdom and strengthening its position as a center of commerce and culture. But Queen Chevaka's influence was not solely confined to political matters. She also played a critical role in ensuring that Pandukabhaya's reign was seen as just and fair in the eyes of the people. She encouraged her son to implement reforms that would benefit the common people, ensuring that justice was served and that the wealth of the kingdom was distributed more equitably. Under her guidance, Pandukabhaya instituted new laws that protected the rights of farmers, artisans, and merchants, allowing for a more prosperous and stable society. One of the Queen's most significant reforms was the establishment of a royal council composed of both nobles and commoners. This council served as an advisory body to Pandukabhaya, allowing representatives from all segments of society to have a voice in the governance of the kingdom. Queen Chevaka understood that for Anuradhapura to truly thrive, the people needed to feel included in the decision-making process, not just as subjects, but as active participants in the kingdom's future. As the years passed, Pandukabhaya's rule became increasingly characterized by peace and prosperity. The kingdom flourished under his leadership, and the alliances forged by Queen Chevaka helped to secure its place as one of the most powerful and influential kingdoms in the region. The old power struggles that had once torn Anuradhapura apart seemed like distant memories, replaced by a new era of unity and cooperation. But even as the kingdom prospered, Chevaka knew that the work of leadership was never truly done. There would always be challenges, whether from within the royal family or from foreign invaders. But with her guidance, Pandukabhaya had become the king he was always meant to be, not a ruler who relied solely on force, but one who understood the power of diplomacy, wisdom, and justice. Together, mother and son had created a kingdom that would endure for generations. As Queen Chevaka stood at her son's side, watching Anuradhapura thrive, she knew that their legacy would be one of unity, strength, and peace. The battles had been fought, the wars won, but it was through her leadership, her counsel, and her unshakable belief in her son that the kingdom had truly found its place in history. And as long as she was by his side, Pandukabhaya would always have the wisdom and strength to rule with honor and love for his people. As Pandukabhaya's reign grew more secure, the foundations of a prosperous Anuradhapura were firmly in place. Yet, Queen Chevaka knew that their work was far from finished. The battles fought and won had secured their place in history, but the true test of their legacy would be in the long-term stability of the kingdom. Now, As the winds of peace began to blow through the land, Chevaka turned her gaze to the future, both her sons and the kingdoms. Chevaka's vision was clear. Her son's reign would not be remembered for just its military victories or the wealth that flowed into Anuradhapura's coffers. No, it would be defined by something greater, the creation of a kingdom that would endure for generations, a kingdom where justice, peace, and prosperity would be the cornerstones of its existence. And that, Chevaka knew, required more than just political maneuvering. It required the establishment of a lasting legacy that would ensure the stability of the dynasty for centuries to come. In the years following Pandukabhaya's coronation, the queen began to focus on two key pillars: securing the future of the royal bloodline and strengthening the social fabric of Anuradhapura. The royal lineage and succession. Chevaka understood that the greatest threat to any dynasty was uncertainty. The future of Anuradhapura and of Pandukabhaya's reign would rest upon the shoulders of the next generation. She knew that without a secure line of succession, the kingdom could fall into chaos once again, torn apart by the same internal struggles that had nearly destroyed it in the past. As the queen considered the future, she saw the importance of securing a strong heir, one who would carry on her son's work and continue the policies that had brought Anuradhapura such prosperity. Pandukabhaya, though already a capable ruler, had yet to marry. Chevaka recognized the need to find him a queen who not only possessed the grace and dignity befitting a ruler, but who would also be a strong partner in continuing the royal bloodline. She had watched her son grow into a wise and just king, but she knew that the time was approaching when he would need to establish his own family. A family that would carry the mantle of leadership forward. Through careful diplomacy and strategic planning, Chevaka began to identify potential candidates for Pandukabhaya's future queen. She understood that the right marriage alliance could strengthen the kingdom's position both domestically and abroad. Her first priority was to secure a union with a royal family from a neighboring kingdom, one that would reinforce the ties between Anuradhapura and its allies, while also ensuring the continuity of the royal bloodline. The queen's decision was not based solely on political calculation, however. She also sought to ensure that Pandukabhaya's marriage would bring him happiness and fulfillment. The woman she selected was Princess Sita, a noblewoman of intelligence, grace, and kindness, who was known for her wisdom and integrity. In her, Chevaka saw not only a potential queen but a woman who would support Pandukabhaya in his efforts to rule justly, and who would be a capable and loving mother to the heirs of Anuradhapura. When the union was announced, the people of the kingdom rejoiced. Pandukabhaya and Princess Sita were well matched in both character and intellect. The queen had chosen wisely, ensuring that the future of the kingdom would rest in capable hands. As the royal wedding ceremony took place, the bond between the two families symbolized a new era of cooperation and unity for the kingdom of Anuradhapura. Strengthening the social fabric. While securing the royal bloodline was of paramount importance, Chevaka also knew that the true strength of a kingdom lay in the hearts and minds of its people. As Anuradhapura grew in wealth and influence, the queen focused on the development of the kingdom's social systems. She believed that the well-being of the people, peasants, artisans, traders, and scholars alike, was essential for the long-term success of the monarchy. After all, a kingdom ruled by fear and oppression could never prosper for long. One of Chevaka's most lasting contributions was her focus on education and the arts. She believed that a well-educated populace was the backbone of a strong and stable kingdom. Under her guidance, Anuradhapura became a center of learning and culture. She established royal schools where children of all classes could receive an education regardless of their birth. These schools focused not only on reading and writing but also on moral teachings, instilling in the youth a sense of duty to their kingdom and their king. Chevaka also supported the arts, recognizing that culture and creativity played a vital role in uniting the people. The queen sponsored the creation of temples, libraries, and art galleries, ensuring that Anuradhapura would be remembered not only for its political strength but also for its cultural achievements. The kingdom flourished as a center of literature, philosophy, and the visual arts, drawing scholars, artists, and intellectuals from all corners of the known world. These cultural endeavors not only brought prestige to Anuradhapura but also fostered a sense of pride and unity among the people. In addition to education and culture, Queen Chevaka worked to improve the legal system of Anuradhapura. She believed that justice should be accessible to all, not just the wealthy and powerful. Working alongside Pandukabhaya, She helped establish a system of courts where grievances could be heard and disputes settled in a fair and transparent manner. The rule of law became one of the cornerstones of the kingdom, ensuring that the people had confidence in their rulers and that justice would be served. The queen's legacy. As the years passed and Anuradhapura continued to grow and thrive, Queen Chevaka watched with pride as her vision for the future unfolded before her. Pandukabhaya, strengthened by her counsel and love, ruled with wisdom and fairness. Together, they had created a kingdom that was not only secure but flourishing, a kingdom that valued justice, culture, and the welfare of its people. But as much as the queen had contributed to the kingdom's success, she knew that her time was not infinite. Her son was now firmly established on the throne, and the future of Anuradhapura was in his hands. As she grew older, Queen Chevaka began to focus more on ensuring that the principles she had fought for, justice, unity, and the well-being of the people, would be passed down to the next generation. In the quiet moments, Chevaka would look to her son and granddaughter, knowing that her legacy was secure. The kingdom was now a beacon of prosperity and peace in a tumultuous world, and as she looked to the future, she saw that the work she had begun would continue long after her time. Queen Chevaka's legacy was not just in the buildings, schools, and reforms she had championed, nor in the alliances she had forged. It was in the values she instilled in her son, the values of leadership guided by wisdom, love for the people, and a deep sense of duty. These values would continue to shape the kingdom of Anuradhapura for generations to come, long after she was gone. And so, Queen Chevaka, knowing that her son would continue her work, faded from the court, leaving behind a legacy that would endure. Anuradhapura under Pandukabhaya's rule was stronger than ever. The foundations of a great kingdom had been laid, one built on the unshakable strength of love, wisdom, and a vision for the future. The kingdom of Anuradhapura, once torn by war and internal strife, had been steadily rebuilding under Pandukabhaya's reign. Queen Chevaka's wisdom and guidance had set the foundation for a prosperous future, and the people of the kingdom had begun to experience peace and stability once again. The alliances forged through diplomacy, the restoration of the kingdom's cultural and educational institutions, and the just rule of Pandukabhaya had all contributed to the kingdom's resurgence. Yet, as history often teaches, no kingdom is ever free from challenges, and the greatest threats to a dynasty are often internal. Though the kingdom was flourishing, the political landscape remained precarious. The memory of the bitter power struggles that had once plagued the royal family still lingered in the hearts and minds of those who had fought for control of Anuradhapura. The divisions that had nearly torn the kingdom apart had not been forgotten, and some members of the royal family, as well as ambitious courtiers, still sought to shift the balance of power in their favor. The most significant threat came from Pandukabhaya's half-brother, Prince Saliya, the son of the late King Pandukabhaya by a different queen. Though Saliya had not been a prominent figure during the early years of Pandukabhaya's reign, he had never been completely satisfied with his position in the royal court. He had long resented his younger half-brother for claiming the throne, despite the fact that the throne was his by birthright. Saliya believed that his bloodline gave him a stronger claim to the throne, and he had spent years building alliances in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Prince Saliya's discontent was shared by some of the older factions within the royal court. They saw Pandukabhaya's reign, though just and prosperous, as too focused on reform. The king's commitment to uniting the kingdom through diplomacy and just rule had alienated some of the more traditionalists within the court, who believed that strength and military power should be the cornerstones of the monarchy. These nobles had long been loyal to the old regime, and many saw in Saliya a figure who could return the kingdom to its former glory, one where military power and bloodlines were paramount. Saliya, now a seasoned warrior in his own right, began to rally support. He sought to turn the tide by aligning himself with the military leaders who had fought alongside the late King Pandukabhaya, as well as with some of the more influential nobles who had grown disillusioned with Pandukabhaya's reforms. These were men who believed that Pandukabhaya's vision of the future was weak and that the true strength of Anuradhapura lay in its ability to dominate through military might. As rumors of Saliya's growing support began to spread, Queen Chevaka grew increasingly concerned. She had always known that Pandukabhaya's reign would be tested, but she had hoped that the internal threats to their dynasty had been quelled for good. Now, with Saliya's rebellion gaining momentum, The queen realized that the time had come for her to once again step into the political arena and guide her son through the greatest test of his reign. The conflict between the two half-brothers was not simply a matter of ambition, it was a question of the soul of Anuradhapura. Saliya represented the old ways, the traditions of power through military strength and bloodline, while Pandukabhaya, with his mother's guidance, had embraced a new vision for the kingdom, one that prioritized justice, unity, and diplomacy over force. The two brothers had different visions for the future of the kingdom, and the conflict between them threatened to tear the fragile peace apart. The battle of ideals. As tensions between Pandukabhaya and Saliya grew, the people of Anuradhapura were forced to choose sides. Some still saw Pandukabhaya as the rightful king, believing in his vision for the kingdom's future. They admired his ability to unite the kingdom after years of civil strife, and they believed in his ability to maintain peace through diplomacy and reform. Others, however, saw Saliya as the true heir, one who would restore the glory of Anuradhapura through military might and traditional rule. The court, too, became a battleground for competing ideologies. Pandukabhaya's supporters, those who believed in his reforms, clashed with Saliya's traditionalist faction. Each side attempted to garner more influence within the royal palace, leveraging alliances and strategic marriages to strengthen their positions. Queen Chevaka, who had once been the calm hand guiding her son, found herself once again at the center of a royal struggle. This time, however, she faced a more complex challenge. Her son's vision of the future was being questioned by those within his own kingdom, and she knew that this ideological battle would shape the kingdom's future. The queen's response was to use her considerable diplomatic skills to navigate the growing tensions. She recognized that a direct military confrontation between the brothers would only lead to more bloodshed and division. Instead, she worked to broker peace between the factions, offering compromises and concessions where possible, but also reminding the court of the importance of unity. Chevaka knew that Pandukabhaya's reign had not been built on military victories alone, it had been built on the ideals of justice, unity, and respect for all people. To allow the old ways to dominate once again would be to betray everything they had worked for. She made it clear to the court that the future of Anuradhapura lay in the hands of those who embraced progress and reform, not those who clung to the past. A turning point. As the tensions reached a breaking point, Queen Chevaka's wisdom began to bear fruit. Her diplomatic efforts to neutralize Saliya's growing power had not been without their difficulties, but slowly. Key nobles and military commanders began to see the value in Pandukabhaya's vision for the future. The turning point came when Chevaka brokered a secret meeting between her son and Prince Saliya. The queen's calm presence in the midst of this confrontation was a testament to her unwavering belief in the power of dialogue over conflict. In a tense and emotional meeting, Pandukabhaya and Saliya stood face to face for the first time in years. The air was thick with tension as the two half-brothers debated the future of the kingdom. Pandukabhaya spoke of peace, unity, and progress, while Saliya emphasized the need for military strength and tradition. The clash of ideals was palpable, but it was Queen Chevaka's words that finally broke the impasse. "Both of you are heirs to this kingdom," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But remember this, it is not just strength of arms that builds a kingdom. It is strength of character. The future of Anuradhapura lies in its ability to embrace both its traditions and its progress. You must unite, not divide. For the good of the kingdom, for the good of its people. You must choose the path of reconciliation, not conflict." The words of the queen were a turning point in the brothers' struggle. Though Saliya was initially unwilling to yield, he eventually recognized the wisdom in his mother's words. The vision that Pandukabhaya had set forth for the kingdom, one of justice, diplomacy, and unity, was not one he could simply dismiss. After a long and difficult conversation, Saliya agreed to lay down his ambitions for the throne in exchange for a prominent role in the kingdom's military leadership. The two brothers reached a fragile peace, one that would require careful management but would ultimately preserve the unity of the kingdom. The legacy secured. With Saliya's rebellion quelled and the kingdom's political divisions healed, Pandukabhaya's reign was once again secure. The internal challenges, though difficult, had strengthened the resolve of the king and his mother. The kingdom of Anuradhapura had faced its greatest test yet, but it had emerged stronger for it. As Queen Chevaka watched her son's reign take a new, more stable form, she knew that the legacy of the Maurya dynasty was safe. The future of Anuradhapura, though uncertain at times, was guided by the wisdom and strength of its rulers who balanced tradition and progress in a way that ensured the kingdom's prosperity for generations to come. But even as peace returned to the land, Queen Chevaka remained vigilant. The political landscape would always be fraught with challenges, and she knew that the work of leadership was never truly done. Yet, with her son at the helm, and with the strength of their shared vision, Anuradhapura was poised to flourish for centuries to come. The years passed swiftly in the kingdom of Anuradhapura as the kingdom grew ever more prosperous under the rule of King Pandukabhaya. The wounds of the past had begun to heal, and the kingdom, once torn by civil war and political strife, now flourished in peace. The reforms that had been carefully set in motion by Pandukabhaya and guided by his mother, Queen Chevaka, bore fruit in the form of a stable and prosperous society. The cities hummed with activity, the fields yielded abundant harvests, and the people, regardless of their status or background, flourished under the just rule of their king. Queen Chevaka, though older, was still a force of wisdom and guidance within the royal court. Her influence remained strong, though it was becoming increasingly clear that her time, like all things in life, was drawing to a close. Though she had dedicated her life to the well-being of the kingdom and the success of her son, the queen began to turn inward, reflecting on the long journey she had taken, from the early days of protecting her son in exile to the struggles she had overcome to ensure his rightful place on the throne. Her heart swelled with pride as she looked back on the legacy she had helped create, but her mind was burdened by the knowledge that she would soon leave her beloved Anuradhapura behind. As she entered her final years, Chevaka's role in the kingdom had shifted. She no longer sought to guide every decision of the court. Instead, she focused on the things that mattered most to her, ensuring that her son's reign would continue smoothly, imparting her wisdom to the next generation, and helping to shape the future of the kingdom she had helped to rebuild. She saw herself not as a ruler but as a custodian of the kingdom's values, a keeper of its history and its promise. The queen's health had begun to decline, and she knew that her time to pass the mantle was near. But she did not approach her final years with fear or regret. Instead, she embraced them with a sense of fulfillment. She had lived a life dedicated to her family, her kingdom, and the betterment of its people. Now, as her body weakened, she could find peace in knowing that Anuradhapura would continue to thrive long after her departure. The passing of wisdom. One of the queen's final acts was to call upon her son, King Pandukabhaya, for a private audience in her chambers. It was a quiet evening, and the golden light of the setting sun streamed through the palace windows, casting a warm glow across the room. Chevaka, sitting on her bed, looked out at the peaceful scene with a reflective gaze. Her eyes, though tired, still held the spark of the wisdom she had carried for so many years. Pandukabhaya entered the room with a look of concern on his face, knowing that his mother's health had deteriorated in recent months. He knelt beside her, taking her hand gently in his, and looked into her eyes with the deep love and respect he had always held for her. "Mother," he said softly, "I see the weight of the years on you. You have done more for this kingdom than I could ever express. I do not know how to thank you for everything." Chevaka smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with emotion. "You need not thank me, my son," she said in a voice that still held its customary strength. "It was never for praise or recognition that I did these things. I did it for the future of Anuradhapura, for you, and for the generations that will follow. I have lived my life with the conviction that what we build today will shape tomorrow." The queen paused, her gaze drifting to the window, where the first stars began to appear in the evening sky. "When I was young, I did not know what kind of legacy I would leave behind. I only knew that I wanted to protect you, to guide you, and to ensure that Anuradhapura would one day be a kingdom of peace and prosperity. I see now that we have done so much, and you, my son, have surpassed all expectations." Pandukabhaya remained silent, his heart full as he listened to his mother. He knew that her words were a testament to her life's work and her deep love for both him and the kingdom. "Mother, your wisdom has shaped me into the king I am today. You have taught me more than I could ever have learned in books. You taught me not just how to rule, but how to be a man of honor, of justice, and of compassion. Anuradhapura is thriving because of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Queen Chevaka looked at him with a serene expression. "And you, my son, will continue to lead the kingdom with the same heart and spirit. I have no doubt that you will carry Anuradhapura into a bright future. But remember this, Pandukabhaya. It is not enough to rule with power alone. You must always rule with wisdom, with empathy, and with the love of your people. They are your true strength. She paused again, her eyes softening with the wisdom that only a mother could impart. The kingdom will have challenges, as all kingdoms do. But if you remember that you are its servant, not its master, you will always know the right path. And in times of difficulty, turn to your people. They will guide you as much as you guide them. Pandukabhaya nodded, tears welling in his eyes as he looked at the woman who had shaped his life. He knew that the time was coming when he would have to carry on without her. Though his heart ached at the thought of losing her, he found comfort in the knowledge that her lessons would stay with him forever. The passing of the queen. In the weeks that followed, Queen Chevaka's health continued to decline. She had made her peace with her fate, knowing that she had done all she could for her kingdom and her son. On a quiet evening, as the stars shone brightly above Anuradhapura, Queen Chevaka passed away in her sleep, peacefully and without pain. The kingdom mourned the loss of its greatest queen. The streets of Anuradhapura were filled with the sound of sorrow as people from all walks of life came to pay their respects. Pandukabhaya, now a king in every sense of the word, stood before the royal palace, his heart heavy with grief but filled with resolve. His mother had left him with a kingdom that was stronger than ever, but more importantly, she had left him with the tools to ensure its future. He stood for a moment, reflecting on all she had taught him, the sacrifices she had made, and the love she had poured into both him and Anuradhapura. He vowed that he would honor her legacy by continuing to rule with wisdom, compassion, and strength. Queen Chevaka's funeral was a somber occasion, but it was also a celebration of her life, a life that had shaped the destiny of Anuradhapura. Her name would be remembered for generations to come, not just as the mother of a king, but as the guiding force behind a kingdom that had risen from the ashes of war into an era of peace and prosperity. As the sun set over Anuradhapura, Pandukabhaya stood alone, gazing out over the kingdom his mother had helped to build. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but with his mother's wisdom in his heart, he knew that Anuradhapura would continue to thrive, just as she had always dreamed. The death of Queen Chevaka marked the end of an era in Anuradhapura. Her passing left a deep void in the heart of the kingdom, but her legacy lived on, not just in the kingdom's prosperity, but in the values she had instilled in her son, King Pandukabhaya. The lessons she had imparted to him, the importance of justice, compassion, unity, and the strength of wisdom, became the cornerstone of his reign, guiding him as he navigated the complexities of kingship. In the months following her death, Pandukabhaya took the time to reflect on his mother's life and the immense impact she had had not only on his own growth but on the future of Anuradhapura. He often found himself walking the quiet halls of the royal palace, where his mother had once advised him on matters of state, and gazing out over the city she had helped build from the ashes of war. The city now stood as a symbol of peace and prosperity, a testament to her foresight and tireless work. The people of Anuradhapura, too, felt her absence deeply. Queen Chevaka had been more than just a queen, she had been a mother to the kingdom. Her influence had reached beyond the palace walls, touching the lives of commoners and nobles alike. She had championed education, justice, and the arts, and she had been a tireless advocate for the well-being of her people. In her time, Anuradhapura had not only grown in strength but had become a beacon of hope for the entire region. The kingdom thrives. Under Pandukabhaya's rule, Anuradhapura continued to thrive. The reforms that he and his mother had put into place were deeply embedded in the kingdom's fabric, and the people flourished. The kingdom had become a center of culture, education, and commerce, attracting scholars, merchants, and artisans from all corners of the world. The temples, schools, and marketplaces that Queen Chevaka had helped restore and expand had become the beating heart of the kingdom, a symbol of the progress and unity they had worked so hard to achieve. Pandukabhaya, now a king in his own right, ruled with the wisdom his mother had instilled in him. He continued to make decisions that reflected the balance she had taught him, strength tempered by compassion, power wielded for the benefit of the people. He had become a king of peace, known throughout the land for his fair rule and his commitment to justice. Though he had inherited the throne through tumultuous means, he now wore it with the confidence and dignity that came from understanding the true responsibilities of leadership. Pandukabhaya also made sure that his mother's legacy lived on in the institutions she had founded. He continued to support education and culture, funding the creation of more schools and temples, and ensuring that the arts flourished in Anuradhapura. He also carried forward the diplomatic ties his mother had established with neighboring kingdoms, strengthening alliances and ensuring the kingdom's security. But perhaps the most important way Pandukabhaya honored his mother's legacy was in how he ruled the kingdom. He often recalled her words, spoken in her final moments. A king must be a servant to his people, not their master. He never lost sight of this principle, always striving to serve the people of Anuradhapura with honor and humility. The rise of the next generation. As time passed, Pandukabhaya's children grew, and he began to look to the future of the dynasty. Queen Chevaka's wisdom and vision had ensured that the kingdom would continue to flourish. But Pandukabhaya knew that the future of Anuradhapura would depend on the next generation. He took great care in raising his children, instilling in them the same values that his mother had passed on to him. They were taught the ways of leadership, the importance of justice, and the need to serve the people. Pandukabhaya's eldest son, Prince Abhya, began to show signs of wisdom and strength from an early age. The prince, with his father's guidance, grew into a capable leader who understood the intricacies of governance and the needs of the people. Though the young prince was still learning the ways of the court, Pandukabhaya saw in him the same qualities that had made Queen Chevaka so successful: wisdom, compassion, and a deep sense of duty. As Pandukabhaya aged, he began to step back from the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom, placing more responsibility in the hands of his son. In his final years, Pandukabhaya knew that he could leave the kingdom in capable hands. He had not only ensured the strength of Anuradhapura through his reign, but he had also created the foundation for future rulers who would continue the work his mother had begun. The Queen's eternal legacy. Queen Chevaka's legacy was not merely one of policy or law, it was a legacy of love, wisdom, and sacrifice. Her teachings had shaped not just a king, but an entire kingdom. The kingdom of Anuradhapura had become a place where the people were valued, where justice prevailed, and where culture and education flourished. It was a kingdom that honored its past while looking forward to its future. And it was a kingdom built on the unshakable strength of a mother's love for her son and her people. As Pandukabhaya sat on his throne in the final years of his reign, he often found himself reflecting on the sacrifices his mother had made for him and for the kingdom. He remembered her tireless dedication, her ability to navigate the complexities of court politics, and most of all, her unwavering belief in the potential of Anuradhapura. He knew that the kingdom was what it was because of her guidance and her wisdom. In the end, Queen Chevaka's name became synonymous with peace, wisdom, and justice. Her memory lived on not just in the physical structures she helped build or the reforms she instituted, but in the very soul of the kingdom itself. Anuradhapura had become a beacon of hope and prosperity, and it would remain so for centuries to come. As Pandukabhaya's reign came to a close, he looked back at the life he had shared with his mother. He knew that she had shaped him into the ruler he had become, and he was grateful beyond words for her unwavering love and guidance. Though she was no longer with him, her presence remained eternal in the kingdom she had helped create, a kingdom that would live on, not just through bloodlines, but through the values and wisdom she had passed down. And so, the kingdom of Anuradhapura, under the reign of Pandukabhaya and his descendants, flourished for generations, its people forever honoring the legacy of the queen who had set them on the path to greatness. Queen Chevaka, through her wisdom, love, and sacrifice, had ensured that the kingdom would thrive for centuries to come.